Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Yoselyn Ortega. Yoselyn Ortega was born in 1962 in the Dominican Republic as the youngest of 8 siblings. Her family was relatively wealthy, and her parents owned a wine cellar. She did not encounter any difficulties until her teens, when a sister of hers suddenly died from a brain aneurysm. This thing deeply affected her. She did not leave the house for about a year and suffered from depression, missing her sister. During this time, she began hearing voices urging her to harm others, but she confided only in a few sisters, asking them to keep it secret. For many years, almost no one knew about this, not even her parents, who noticed some odd behavior but attributed it to grief and depression over her sister's death. Yoselyn continued with her life, resisting the voices and not harming anyone. After finishing school, she attended university to study accounting. Despite her struggles, she graduated in 1985. She then decided to move to New York, where one of her sisters lived. After that, she and her sister started living together, working together to cover expenses. Eventually, Yoselyn met a man and started a relationship with him, marrying in 1995. The following year, they had a son named Jesus. However, after their child was born, the relationship between the couple became worse even though they tried to save it. In 1999, Yoselyn and her husband are divorced, leaving her alone with a young child in New York, where the cost of living is very high. Faced with a lot of financial difficulties, so she decided to send her 4-year-old son, Jesus, for grandparents to take care of. Then she returned to the United States, where she can earn more money for herself and her child. Yoselyn lived with her sister, and they supported each other by working together in a factory and taking part-time cleaning jobs. She kept in regular contact with her parents and son, calling them almost every day. In 2004, Yoselyn became a U.S. citizen. After saving enough money, Yoselyn returned to her homeland in March 2008 to raise her son. Things were going well until April 2008, when her best friend Celine tragically ended her life on a balcony. This news plunged Yoselyn into depression, making her extremely paranoid. She did not leave the house and forbade her son to go to school. Whenever she heard noises outside, like a dog barking, she will hide under the bed and force her son to hide with her. As time passed, the situation improved. Yoselyn regained her composure, and her fears and worries faded away. She returned to work in the USA with her sister, leaving her son with her parents. Eventually, she met the affluent Krim family, who were looking for a nanny for their children. Kevin Krim, the head of the family, was a Harvard graduate, and his wife, Marina, graduated from the University of Southern California. They met at an Italian restaurant through friends and immediately hit it off. They got married in 2003. Marina and Kevin's first daughter, Lucia, was born in 2006, followed by their second daughter, Nessie, in 2009. When Marina was pregnant with her third child, the family relocated from California to New York due to Kevin's job. He was offered the position of Chief Executive Officer at Symbian. Previously, he worked in senior roles at Bloomberg and Yahoo. The family settled in one of Manhattan's finest neighborhoods, Upper West Side. Marina stays at home to do housework and take care of the children, but she later started a blog to document their daily lives as a personal hobby. The second daughter, Nessie, had health issues that required Marina's full attention. As a result, Marina began to have difficulty doing housework and had no time to take her children to extra classes like dancing or swimming. Additionally, she was in the late stages of pregnancy, making it difficult for her to manage anything. Her husband, Kevin, was frequently away on business trips and couldn't assist her, so they decided to hire a nanny for help. Marina and Kevin began searching for a nanny. At the dance studio Marina attended with her children, they met Yoselyn's sister, Celia, housekeeper for another family. Celia introduced Yoselyn to them and sent her younger sister's resume. Impressed by Yoselyn's experience with children, they contacted Yoselyn's previous employer and received a positive recommendation. Then, they invited Yoselyn for an interview and immediately liked her. She was sociable, smiling, and friendly. They decided to hire her as a part-time nanny. She came to their home after lunch and helped with the children until the evening. However, the entire story about the resume was fabricated. Yoselyn has no experience with childcare, unlike her sister, Celia. However, she needed a good job, and when an opportunity arose to earn a decent salary of $500 a week, Celia helped her create a resume. Despite her lack of experience, but Yoselyn excelled in the job. She got along well with the children, and there were no issues for about 2 years. Unfortunately, the Krim family could not have anticipated the tragedy that followed. Yoselyn appeared to be a kind and trustworthy woman, and the Krims believed their children were completely safe with her. This gave Marina free time to teach at a drawing school, her hobby, and continue blogging. The nanny Yoselyn treated the family's children as if they were her own, often joking that she had not one son, but 4 children. The children loved her in return, giving her drawings and becoming attached to her. The youngest son of the Krim family, Leo, couldn't even fall asleep without her. Marina was very cautious. She rarely left Yoselyn alone with the children, she doing so only in cases of extreme necessity. Usually, Marina was always with the children, and Yoselyn just assisted. Even when Marina left the house, she asked her relatives to keep an eye on Yoselyn. According to Celia, Yoselyn was happy with her job as a nanny. She earned a good salary for part-time work and received gifts, including expensive ones. Krim family even bought her plane tickets to the Dominican Republic so she can visit loved ones. They became so close to Yoselyn that in February 2012, they all went on vacation together to the Dominican Republic. There, they met Yoselyn's family, spent a night at her family's house, enjoyed the wonderful vacation, and gave her family many gifts. Krim family also helped Yoselyn's grown-up son, Jesus, move to New York to be closer to his mother. They bought 17-year-old Jesus an iPad for school, let him stay with them, and paid him well just for walking their 2 dogs. Although he had graduated from school in his home country, but Jesus had to repeat the 11th grade in the US under a different American program at a regular school. When he wasn't accepted, Yoselyn had to arrange for him to attend a private school, which was expensive for her. She was very protective of her son and didn't let him go outside unless necessary. She made him hide under the bed during loud noises, as he did in childhood, and when he went to school, she would to follow him secretly to ensure nothing happened to him. In April 2012, Yoselyn faced difficulties when she was evicted from the Bronx apartment she shared with her son. She had invested heavily in the housing, but the landlord evicted them. She was forced to move back in with her 3 sisters and their families, totaling 6 more people. The living situation was overcrowded and cramped. Yoselyn asked the Krim family for a raise so she could afford separate housing. They agreed to pay her more if she also cleaned their house for 5 hours a week. She accepted, but for the first time in a long time, she again had financial difficulties because she had to raise her son and pay the rent alone. Despite a decent income, her expenses were still too high. This situation stressed Yoselyn to sell jewelry and cosmetics to neighbors for extra money. Initially, she was successful, but when she gave cosmetics to a friend to sell, the friend disappeared without paying her back. This left she with a significant debt, forcing her to take on more work. She started cooking rice and preparing chicken dishes to sell. The extra workload exhausted her. She complained to her loved ones, saying the Krim family should pay her to babysit, not to clean and do housework. She felt that their family was so rich, they should just give her a raise without additional duties, and she was angry with them. Marina knew that Yoselyn needed money and began introducing her to friends and acquaintances to work as a nanny. When new clients started reaching out, Yoselyn became upset with Marina. She felt that taking on more work would leave her with less time to spend with her son. Her frustration grew daily. During these months, she lost a lot of weight and appeared tired and worn out. Once a cheerful and happy woman, she became tired and disillusioned with life. She began to have hallucinations, had trouble sleeping. Celia noticed that she started praying frequently at home, reading religious magazines because she saw demons, and began visiting a psychologist. But she hid all this from the Krim family, fearing she might lose her good job. On October 25, 2012, Yoselyn arrived at the Krim family's house at 3 p.m. Marina met Yoselyn at the door, as she was leaving with Nessie for a swimming lesson. She instructed Yoselyn to pick up Lucia from school and take Lucia's to ballet. Then Yoselyn had to go home to put Leo to bed. In the end, they planned to meet at Lucia's ballet class and return home together. Yoselyn and Leo picked up Lucia from school as planned but did not take Lucia to ballet lessons. Instead, they went for a walk in the park, ate ice cream, and then returned home. That day, Yoselyn first spoke to the janitor of the apartment building where the Krim family lived. She asked if Marina had returned home, but the concierge said no. Then, she, Lucia and Leo took the elevator to the apartment and ran into a neighbor. Just half an hour later, a tragedy occurred. Around 5 p.m., Marina and Nessie went to Lucia's ballet class to pick up Lucia. Little girl was supposed to be there with Yoselyn. However, Marina found out that little girl did not come to class. Concerned, Marina rushed back to her Upper West Side apartment in New York. On the way, she tried calling Yoselyn, but Yoselyn didn't answer. Marina initially thought no one was home and that Yoselyn might be out with the children in the park. She went to the concierge to ask if he had seen Yoselyn and the children. The concierge told her that they had recently returned to the building and they may be in the apartment. Marina and Nessie went back to the apartment and began to search each room. When Marina entered the bathroom, she was met with a horrific sight. Her two children, Lucia and Leo, lay lifeless on the floor, covered in blood, and Yoselyn sitting next to them holding a bloody kitchen knife. Seeing Marina's reaction, Yoselyn stabbed herself in the throat twice. Marina got scared. She rushed out of the apartment with Nessie, screaming. The neighbors heard Marina's heart-wrenching screams, and the building security calmed her down before calling 911 and emergency services. When the New York Police Department officers arrived, they found a horrific scene in the Krim family's apartment. Two small children, Lucia and Leo, lay in the bathtub with knife wounds, Marina beside them, overcome with grief and horror. The nanny Yoselyn lay on the floor, bleeding and in critical condition. Doctors found Yoselyn, Lucia, and Leo still alive and rushed them to the hospital. Tragically, Lucia and Leo did not survive. They were pronounced dead on arrival. Lucia was 6 years old, and her brother Leo was 2 years old. The nanny, 50 years old Yoselyn Ortega, survived. She was put into a coma and underwent surgery. She had cut her hands and neck with such force that she broke her cervical vertebrae. Marina was in shock and unable to provide any information to the police, so they gave her a sedative. Her husband, Kevin, who was returning from a business trip, received a frantic voicemail from Marina, but couldn't understand what she was saying. He only knew that something was wrong with the children. When he arrived at the airport, police met him and delivered the devastating news. He fainted and was given first aid before being taken to the hospital to be with Marina. They were overcome with grief and struggled to comprehend how their nanny, who had been caring for their children for 2 years and was considered a member of the family, could commit such a heinous act. A neighbor reported seeing Yoselyn with Lucia and Leo in the elevator just 30 minutes before the tragedy. Lucia and Leo seemed happy and playful, while Yoselyn appeared emotionless and detached. However, the neighbor didn't think much of it, as Yoselyn had behaved similarly in the past. Other nannies in the area, who often helped each other, barely knew Yoselyn, as Yoselyn was very withdrawn and didn't communicate with anyone. They considered her strange. The autopsy revealed Lucia and Leo suffered a horrific death, with nearly beheaded bodies. Lucia suffered more than 30 stab wounds and cuts, indicating that little girl had fought fiercely for her life, leading to severe blood loss. Her younger brother, Leo, had 5 stab wounds to the neck, and his throat was cut from behind. There was no doubt Yoselyn was responsible for the murder. Detectives began to investigate her background in detail. Yoselyn was hospitalized for a week and she was saved. When she regained consciousness, she could only communicate through gestures. She only asked about her family, but she said nothing about the murdered children or the Krim family. Later, when Yoselyn could speak, detectives interviewed her on November 3rd. She did not confess to the murder, but she expressed feelings of resentment towards Krim's family because they often reprimanded her. She refused to have a lawyer during the interrogation. She said she was in the bathroom at the time of the incident, and she denied responsibility for causing the injuries that led to the deaths of Lucia, 6, and Leo, 2. In addition, she said that the children's mother, Marina, knew why this happened. On November 13th, Yoselyn Ortega was charged with the first-degree murder of the children, but she denied her guilt and hired a lawyer. As New York had abolished the death penalty, so she faced life imprisonment. Yoselyn was given a psychiatric examination and psychiatrists found her to be sane and able to appear in court. During the proceedings, Yoselyn declined a plea bargain from the prosecution, which offered her a 30-year sentence in exchange for a guilty plea, allowing her potential release at around 80 years of age. However, she chose not to explain the incident and motives behind the crime, opting instead to be represented by a lawyer. The lawyer argued that her actions were due to her mental illnesses. She broke down and lost control when she harmed Lucia and Leo. 2 psychiatrists for Yoselyn testified that she heard voices, including satanic ones, telling her to harm herself and the children. They stated that she had experienced hallucinations since her teenage years in the Dominican Republic, but her condition had not been diagnosed or treated. Before she was arrested for murder, several family members and friends noted that Yoselyn's behavior had changed in the weeks leading up to the crime. She said she saw demons and shadows of people haunting her, she frequently cried, and prayed for the demons to leave her alone. Shortly before the murders, she threw pots and pans at the pool and kitchen walls to drown out the voices in her head, and sometimes banged her head against the wall to drive the demons away. Yoselyn's sisters blamed the Krim family for the tragedy, accusing them of exploiting she, not allowing her adequate rest, failing to notice signs of mental illness, and leaving her alone with the children. In court, a psychotherapist who had seen Yoselyn testified that he did not find any signs of mental disorder in her, only anxiety and mild depression due to concerns about her son. A recording of her conversation with a psychologist was played, confirming that she did not mention hearing voices or experiencing other symptoms of psychosis. The possibility of Yoselyn having a mental illness was dismissed. A psychiatrist, called by the prosecution, assumed she was angry and was faking psychosis. A relative of Yoselyn mentioned that she envied the Krim family because they could provide for their children in ways she could not, and she had to send her son to live with his grandparents when he was only 4 years old. The defense argued that tensions had arisen between Yoselyn and the Krim family. Besides taking care of the kids, she was also paid to clean their apartment and do odd jobs, which she was reluctant to do due to an allergy to cleaning products. She also disliked being asked by Marina to work for other families. On one occasion, Marina asks her to look after another family's child, while their nanny is on sick leave. She agreed, but the next day she refused to go to the other family. Marina confronted her about this near the school, in front of strangers, making she feel uncomfortable. Afterward, she sat in the park and cried. She believed that Marina intended to humiliate her in front of others. Tensions between the Krim and Yoselyn continued to rise. They were unhappy with her work in the weeks leading up to the murder and had warned her that if she did not improve her performance, she would have to find another job. In particular, Marina felt that she did not spend enough time interacting with the children and fed them unhealthy food. The day before the murder, Marina did not say goodbye to she, which made she very angry and upset. Yoselyn was upset with the Krim family due to a constant lack of money. She also disliked the frequently changing work schedule, which sometimes caused her to miss doctor's appointments. Prolonged dissatisfaction, along with mental disorder, made she increasingly angry, something she could not control. Without realizing what she was doing, she committed murder, her lawyer said. However, the prosecutor argued that the crime was carefully planned in advance. The day before the crime, Yoselyn returned home, took medicine for a headache, talked to her sister Celia, and asked her to care for Jesus as if little boy were her own son. Celia agreed without understanding what Yoselyn meant. On the day of the murders, Yoselyn ensured her son got to school safely and said goodbye to little boy before heading to work. She left Celia an envelope containing important personal documents such as her passport, driver's license, bank cards, insurance certificate, and some cash. She also attached a paper bag with family memorabilia, photographs, and her jewelry to her son's room door. The prosecutor believed this was her way of saying goodbye to her family, she knowing she wouldn't return. She also deliberately did not take Lucia to ballet lessons. The prosecution argued that Jesus' move to the United States triggered her, increased her anxiety, depression, and guilt, so her resentment toward the Krim family also increased. On April 18, 2018, the jury found Yoselyn Ortega's guilty of first-degree child murder. The jury describing her actions as pure evil and dismissing the defense's argument that she wasn't responsible due to mental illness. Although the judge acknowledged that her mental illness influenced her actions that day, he expressed regret that she nor had secured the psychiatric treatment she needed. However, he stressed that planning a crime on that day had been meticulous. Before the court handed down its verdict, Marina said that Yoselyn ended up destroying her own family. At this point, Marina broke into tears, and Yoselyn shamefully lowered her head. Despite the terrible tragedy, the Krim family remained strong. They went on to have 2 more children's sons named Felix and Nose. Kevin requested the judge impose the maximum penalty on Yoselyn to ensure she would never leave prison. He observed no remorse from her and believed she should just spend the rest of her life in prison. The prosecutor echoed Kevin's request, urging the judge to sentence her to life imprisonment without parole. He argued that Yoselyn not only brutally killed Lucia and Leo, and she didn't even regret her actions. She attempted to end her own life to escape responsibility for her actions, but her plan did not succeed. Yoselyn's lawyer requested leniency from the judge during sentencing. She argued that the jury reached this decision because they were influenced by Marina's emotional state, not based on an objective assessment of the evidence. Ultimately, the judge ruled in favor of the prosecution. On May 14, 2018, Yoselyn Ortega, aged 55, received the maximum sentence of life imprisonment without parole. However, she remained composed for most of the trial. The case was particularly difficult when it involved the children, which moved many to tears, but Yoselyn did not cry. When witnesses described the kindness of the Krim family towards her, she shook her head in disagreement. However, she began to cry when the verdict was announced. After the verdict, Yoselyn expressed her regret in Spanish, saying, "She very sorry about everything that happened," and asked for forgiveness from God, Marina, and Kevin. During the trial, it was disclosed that the Krim family had been misled by false claims of Yoselyn's experience as a nanny. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jasmine Richardson. In town, the Richardson family was renowned for being exemplary. Deborah and Mark, along with their children, 8-year-old Tyler and 12-year-old Jasmine, resided in a beautiful and cozy home. Like all Canadians, they were extremely hospitable and sociable. Their home frequently hosted guests, and the atmosphere was built on principles of love and respect. However, everything took a turn for the worse when their eldest daughter, Jasmine, entered puberty. The once calm girl underwent a drastic transformation. Firstly, her character changed. She became bold and frivolous. Conflicts between her and her parents began to arise, and her academic performance started to decline. Secondly, her preferences in music and clothing drastically changed. She shifted from enjoying modern pop to heavy rock. Bright colors and clothing were replaced by shades of gray and black, and her dressing style became provocative as she sought to appeal to boys, drawing attention to her curves. As a result, her interaction with former friends significantly decreased, and she began to spend more time alone in front of her computer screen. The door to her room was often closed, indicating a shift towards isolation. With the advent of the internet at home, she developed a fascination with Gothic themes, dark poetry, criminal psychology, and human anatomy. Miss Richardson even went so far as to identify as a witch, embracing the Wiccan religion. To explore these interests, she frequented various websites where she found a community of like-minded individuals who shared her passions. Her social media profile greeted visitors with the phrase, "Welcome to my tragic world." At first glance, it seemed like a typical teenage angst, marked by an excessive flair for drama and mysticism. However, she became increasingly withdrawn from her family. On her profile, she had listed a false name and claimed to be 15, as she preferred interacting with older individuals. Her parents attempted to be supportive during this challenging period, suggesting they spend quality time together and find common interests. However, she found these suggestions dull. Jasmine considered her younger brother a nuisance and gradually stopped communicating with him. Yet she could spend hours on end at the computer conversing with strangers. Deborah and Mark recognized that their daughter's current state was a phase. She would mature and gain wisdom. As a result, they were quite permissive of her new interests. One day, Jasmine informed them that she wanted to attend a punk rock band concert. Her parents agreed, unaware of the consequences this outing would have. In early 2006, Jasmine Richardson went to a local youth band concert, following her own pursuits. She knew Jeremy Steinke, he who had been captivating her heart for months, would be there, as he was also drawn to Gothic culture. They had met on a vampire enthusiast's website where they occasionally exchanged messages. Jeremy presented himself as a 30-year-old werewolf craving blood, and to prove it, he wore a vial of blood around his neck, though it was unclear whether the fluid was human or animal in origin. Nonetheless, he clearly considered himself extraordinary, which Jasmine found extremely appealing. After meeting at a concert, the young people's affection for each other continued to grow. Eventually, Stinka worked up the courage to ask her out, and to his delight, she happily agreed. Everything seemed perfect, but there was a major obstacle. Jeremy was 23 years old. The couple was well aware that her parents would not approve of their relationship due to their significant age difference, so they decided to keep it a secret. Furthermore, Jeremy's troubled past would only make matters worse in her parents' eyes. Jeremy grew up in poverty, living with his mother and sister in a trailer. He had a troubled relationship with his mother, who drank excessively and had a string of volatile partners. These partners would often beat him when they were drunk. As a result, by the time he was 13, Jeremy was struggling in school and had developed a fragile mental state. Feeling overwhelmed, Jeremy once attempted to take his own life by hanging himself. Fortunately, he was stopped in time, Afterwards, doctors diagnosed him with depression and hyperactivity. At school, he was bullied, and eventually, he stopped attending classes altogether. As he got older, Jeremy became fascinated with the idea of being immortal and started visiting websites that focused on dark themes. His online profile was filled with topics like pain, self-harm, and bloody violence. Few people knew about Jeremy's secret relationship, except for his close friends, who found it unusual and disturbing. The couple managed to keep their communication private until the Richardsons started monitoring their daughter's excessive internet use. Deborah and Mark were alarmed when they discovered their daughter Jasmine had been chatting with strangers online, which is a concern for any parent. They immediately took away her computer to protect her. What they found out next was even more disturbing. Jasmine had become infatuated with an adult man who seemed to have questionable motives, known by the ominous nickname Soul Eater. This made her relationship with Jeremy officially off limits. Deborah and Mark sought the help of a psychologist to free their daughter from this harmful relationship. They believed that therapy would also improve their relationship with Jasmine. Fortunately, it worked, and Jasmine appeared to be getting back to a normal life, assuring them that the ordeal was behind her. As a sign of trust, they gave her computer back. Unfortunately, this decision would ultimately seal their fate. Saturday, April 22, 2006, Mrs. Richardson was preparing for bed when she heard a noise in the basement. At first, she thought it was just rats, but as she went downstairs and turned on the light, she saw a person wearing a ski mask standing opposite her, staring at her. Startled, Mrs. Richardson let out a loud scream. The stranger rushed towards her, trying to cover her mouth, but she struggled and screamed even louder. Frustrated, he stepped back, pulled out a knife, and stabbed her repeatedly in the chest. Hearing his wife's screams, Mark rushed downstairs, grabbing a screwdriver he had left on the floor earlier that day while fixing an outlet. When he entered the basement, he was met with a horrific scene. His wife lying in a pool of blood, with the attacker standing next to her. Mark immediately attacked the intruder, but was stabbed in the stomach. As the pain subsided and his eyes began to close, Mark quietly asked why. The attacker replied that it was because his daughter had wished it. Meanwhile, upstairs, Tyler was the only one left. He sat frozen on his bed in his pajamas, too scared to move. He heard the footsteps getting closer and closer until the bedroom door creaked open. Jasmine was thrilled that her parents believed she was remorseful, which allowed them to communicate again. She emailed Jeremy as soon as she got internet, telling him that it started with her parents gone and ended with them together. During therapy, a dark plan formed and solidified over time. Stinka found it tempting but insisted on creativity and attention to detail. The couple knew they couldn't be together while the Richardsons were alive. Later, Jasmine's friends remembered how frequently she talked about her parents, specifically how much she was annoyed by them. As a result, they believed she wanted to kill them. However, no one took Jasmine's words seriously. On Saturday, April 22, 2006, Garrett went to his friend Tyler's house across the street. He wanted to play, and the weather was nice despite being quite chilly, as it was still spring that year. When Garrett approached the house, he noticed the blinds were still closed, and no one answered his knock on the door. This was unusual, as the Richardsons' car was parked in the driveway. Hoping to see someone, the curious child peeked into the living room window but saw no one. Then, Garrett decided to walk around to the back of the house, where he often played with Tyler in the basement. Peeking through the window, he saw something strange and disturbing on the floor, what appeared to be two people lying in a pool of blood. He informed his mother, who was initially skeptical. However, she decided to investigate the family across the street. Together, they approached the house, and Garrett pointed out the window he had looked through earlier. The woman was horrified by what she saw and immediately called emergency services, reporting that something was amiss at the Richardsons, as they appeared to be lying on the basement floor, covered in blood. The police responded quickly, breaking down the front door and descending to the basement where Garrett and his mother had witnessed the scene. Upon entering the dark basement, the officers struggled to identify the bodies on the ground, which were severely mutilated and bloodied. However, it soon became clear that it was Mark and Deborah Richardson, and they had tragically lost their lives. The area was covered in blood, with splatters on the floor, walls, and even the ceiling, a gruesome scene that defied description. Later, the police conducted a thorough search of the house and discovered a small child in the upstairs children's room. The child was lying in bed surrounded by toys, with visible knife wounds and a deeply cut throat. The scene was gruesome, with blood splattered everywhere. The incident was unprecedented in Medicine Hat, with one officer later stating that it would take decades to erase the memory of what they had seen that day. After searching the house, the police discovered that one family member was missing, Jasmine, the Richardsons' eldest daughter. Since the attack seemed to have happened in the basement and her room, while the rest of the house was untouched and nothing was stolen, officers feared for her safety. The state of the bodies suggested the crime occurred the night before, with the perpetrator breaking in and attacking Jasmine's parents. But what had become of Jasmine, and where was she now? The police developed various theories, hoping that by chance, the girl might be safe somewhere outside the home, or that the perpetrator had kidnapped her and was holding her captive. They also considered the possibility of a ransom demand from relatives in the future. However, as time went by, they found no clear answers. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that the Richardson family were truly wonderful people, faithful spouses and loving parents. They didn't deserve to have anyone wish death upon them. However, officers discovered that their eldest daughter had been causing trouble lately. This new information led to a shift in the tone of media announcements, and the investigation began to focus on locating a person of interest, 17-year-old Jasmine Richardson, who was referred to as JR in accordance with Canadian law, which protects the identities of minors. Jasmine and Jeremy Stank were identified as the wanted couple. Police questioned friends and acquaintances, thinking they might be hiding with them, but this lead was a dead end. However, it revealed that the pair attended a party just hours after the crime, where Jasmine seemed unaffected, drinking and making a disturbing joke about carving up her parents, which the guests laughed off as a dark humor. A comic strip found in Jasmine's school locker further confirmed her involvement in the crime, as it detailed how she would deal with her family members alongside her boyfriend as her accomplice. Photos of the suspects were widely circulated, and it was only a matter of time before someone came forward with information about their whereabouts. Soon, a tip arrived, and the couple was spotted in the community of Leader, Saskatchewan, about 130 kilometers from Medicine Hat. Caught off guard, Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Stank were found sleeping peacefully in a pickup truck and offered no resistance as they were taken to the police station. Jasmine was questioned first. She said she loved Stinka, and he felt the same, but their age and social differences were a problem. She claimed the Richardsons wouldn't have approved of their relationship. Jeremy, she said, killed her parents to be with her. When asked if she was involved, Jasmine denied it, saying she was out when it happened and only learned about it later. She accepted it because she loved Jeremy and ran away with him. Detectives struggled to crack the suspects, so they used a clever tactic. They planted an informant in Jeremy's cell who got him to spill details contradicting Jasmine's alibi. Jeremy confessed the murder plot was Jasmine's idea, and he only agreed after they took away her computer. He revealed he killed Deborah and Mark, while Jasmine killed her brother, and even begged him to kill Tyler too. After confessing, Miss Richardson was confronted with the recording and admitted to stabbing her brother out of mercy. She conceived the plan, confirmed by thousands of messages. Jasmine supported Jeremy's dark tastes, feeling alienated from society. Fearing loss, he helped realize the idea. He desired violent revenge, inspired by natural-born killers. With sufficient evidence, the suspects were charged with 3 counts of homicide. The detectives constructed a clear picture of the crime by piecing together the confessions of the accused, witness testimony, and other case evidence. Prior to the crime, Jeremy was intoxicated. Jasmine led him into the house and led him to the basement, where he attacked her mother, Deborah. Deborah was the first to die, suffering 12 stab wounds across her body, with the deepest wound piercing her chest and reaching 12 centimeters deep, ultimately striking her heart. Enraged, Jeremy continued his brutal assault on Mark, inflicting 24 wounds, 9 of which were in the back. Like his wife, the family patriarch bled out on the basement floor. Tyler Richardson, Jasmine's younger brother, was the last to die. While Jeremy was dealing with the parents downstairs, Jasmine inflicted 5 stab wounds on Tyler upstairs. After Jeremy finished with the parents, he went upstairs to assist his girlfriend with the child, callously slashing Tyler's throat as if carving a pumpkin. After washing off the blood at home, Jeremy met Jasmine at a predetermined restaurant where they discussed the night's events. From there, they attended a party. Casey Lancaster, a friend of Jeremy's, helped them eliminate evidence and escape to Saskatchewan. The atrocities they committed are almost indescribable. The couple embarked on their killing spree with an unnerving sense of calm, as if driven by some supernatural force. It's astonishing that, during interrogations and their time in custody, they showed no signs of remorse or regret for their actions. While in detention, they exchanged letters, referring to themselves as legends and immortals. In one letter, Jeremy proposed to Jasmine, who happily accepted. However, their crazed love suddenly began to deteriorate, much like last year's snow. During the trial, they abruptly shifted the blame onto each other. In June 2007, Jasmine Richardson became the first of the 2 to face trial. She entered a not guilty plea, arguing that she was in a trance-like state, unable to intervene while Jeremy killed her family members. Additionally, she claimed that she only inflicted injuries on her younger brother, and it was Jeremy who dealt the fatal blow. Jasmine maintained that her discussions with Jeremy about killing her parents were purely theoretical, but they resonated with him so strongly that he coerced her into turning them into reality. Despite being convicted of 3 counts of homicide, Jasmine Richardson received a 10-year prison sentence, thanks to Canada's juvenile criminal justice law, which stipulates that individuals under 14 cannot be imprisoned for more than 10 years. The sentence prioritized rehabilitating and restoring Jasmine's mental state over punishing her. In 2008, Jeremy Steinke's trial began. He claimed that he never initially intended to kill his girlfriend's parents. However, when discovered in the basement, he felt compelled to attack. Jeremy alleged that he did not harm Tyler, implying that Jasmine was responsible, while he merely observed from the doorway. The defense claimed that Jasmine had deliberately seduced Jeremy, hoping he would rescue her from her parents' strict control. Friends testified that Jeremy had confided in them about his plan, saying he was desperate to keep Jasmine and would do anything to prevent losing her. The lawyers also requested that the charges be downgraded to manslaughter, arguing that Jeremy was under the influence of drugs at the time of the incident. During questioning by the prosecution, Jeremy's inconsistencies were exposed when he was asked why he had committed the crime. He responded, "When you find your soulmate, you'll do whatever it takes for them." Throughout the trial, Jeremy remained unemotional, but he broke down in tears when his mother, Jacqueline May, took the stand in his defense. She acknowledged feeling guilty about her role in his upbringing, which had been marked by physical abuse, beatings, and rejection by her partners. Jeremy was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder and received 3 life sentences. He will not be eligible for parole until at least 25 years later, in 2033. The charge of being an accessory to the crime against Casey Lancaster was dropped in a Medicine Hat court. Casey Lancaster was found guilty of obstructing justice, sentenced to 1 year of house arrest, and ordered to abstain from drugs and alcohol. Jeremy Stank renamed himself Jackson May while in custody. Jasmine Richardson received a 10-year sentence, including 4 years in a psychiatric facility, where she was diagnosed with conduct and oppositional defiant disorders. Later, under community supervision, she showed genuine remorse. Released in 2016, Richardson now lives in Canada under an assumed name, sparking debate about her second chance. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sydney Loof. Sydney Irene Loof was born on August 21, 1993 in Broken Bow, Nebraska, to George and Cecil Loof. She spent her childhood in Arcadia with her parents until 2000, when the family moved to Nanny, where her mother worked as a special education teacher and her father was the school principal. Growing up, Sydney was an energetic and outdoor-oriented girl who loved nature. Her father, George, often took her fishing during her school years. She was also involved in sports, playing basketball and golf, where she showed promise. However, she developed scoliosis, which forced her to give up many of her favorite activities and ended her sports career. After graduating from high school in 2011, Sydney found employment at a local Menards store that specialized in home improvement products. Despite moving from Norfolk to Lincoln for work, Sydney remained close to her family, who made an effort to stay in touch almost daily and regularly met for dinner. Although she lived independently, Sydney frequently returned to her parents' house. Sydney had been battling depression, feeling that the medications she was on were actually making her condition worse. Her mom, Susie, was deeply concerned and urged her to see a new doctor, who prescribed different medications. During phone calls with her mom, Sydney's voice sounded increasingly optimistic as she reported that her mental state was improving. She was attempting to make positive changes in her life, including searching for a new job, as working in a store didn't fulfill her ambitions. However, she was still uncertain about her career goals, which contributed to her feelings of depression. By November 2017, Sydney's mental health had taken a turn for the worse, leading her to take antidepressants and occasionally smoke marijuana. Despite her family and friends offering support, she yearned for romance and love. As a young modern woman with an interest in the same gender, Sydney sometimes turned to social media to find potential dates. To expand her social circle and find a friend, she used Tinder, a popular dating app. In November 2017, Sydney met a man named Aubrey online, and they started exchanging messages. They quickly discovered they had a lot in common, including a love for gambling, hiking, and good food. After just 100 messages, they decided to meet in person on November 14th. Sydney visited Aubrey at his home in Wilbur, and their first meeting went really well. They hit it off and agreed to meet again the following day at Aubrey's house. Before their second meeting, Sydney worked her shift at the store, went home, and got ready. She even took a photo of herself and posted it on Tinder with the caption, "Ready for my date." When Aubrey arrived, they drove off together. The next day, however, Sydney failed to show up for work, which was unusual for the normally reliable Sydney. Despite her high spirits in the days leading up to her disappearance, her family was worried when her coworkers informed them that she hadn't shown up. Sydney's mother, Susie, revealed that her daughter had been struggling with anxiety and depression in the days leading up to her disappearance. Sydney had discussed her deteriorating mental health with her family, who advised her to see a doctor again to take antidepressants. That was the last time Sydney's family saw her. When Sydney's parents went to her apartment, they were extremely surprised to find that she had left her favorite cat, Mimsy, without food or water. This was extremely unlike the caring pet owner they knew Sydney to be. Concerned, they reported Sydney missing to the police. During a welfare check of Sydney's home, the police found the apartment locked and saw nothing out of the ordinary. However, the family remained adamant that something was wrong, and the police took their concerns seriously. On November 16, 2017, Sydney Loof was reported missing after failing to arrive at her workplace, the Menards store showroom on 27th Street and Cornhusker Highway. Sydney had a spinal condition that affected her gait, making her stand out in a crowd. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing a white Columbia brand jacket and a cream-colored shirt. According to her parents, Sydney told her friend on Snapchat on Wednesday morning that she had gone on a date with a man she met online the previous night and planned to meet up with her again that evening. Her car was found in Northeast Lincoln, and police conducted interviews, searching for any leads that could help locate Sydney. A massive search effort was launched to find Sydney, featuring highway billboards with her photo and a televised manhunt. Susie remained adamant that something had happened to her daughter after her date. To support her claim, she shared a screenshot of a Snapchat post by Sydney, captioned, "Ready for my date." Sydney's friends confirmed that she was planning to meet a woman named Aubrey, whom she met on Tinder. During the investigation, police examined Sydney's phone records and surveillance footage from her workplace, which led them to identify a key person of interest. They traced Sydney's last phone signal to a cell tower in the Wilbur neighborhood, likely close to Aubrey's residence, although they had no information about Aubrey's identity at the time. Authorities started looking for a man named Aubrey, who was the last person to see Sydney before she went missing. The problem was that no one knew Aubrey's real identity or if he even existed. Sydney's friend Brooklyn took matters into her own hands and decided to track down Aubrey using Tinder. She downloaded the app, found Aubrey's profile, and exchanged phone numbers with him. This allowed the police to finally learn Aubrey's real name, which was Bailey Boswell, a 26-year-old woman. Further investigation revealed that Bailey lived in an apartment near the cell tower where Sydney's phone was last connected. Bailey shared this apartment with her partner, 52-year-old Aubrey Trail. Bailey Boswell, from a normal and wholesome family in Lyons, Iowa, grew up as a friendly and successful student who excelled in basketball and running. However, following her father's death, her life took a downward turn. She started keeping bad company and got involved with alcohol and illicit drugs. On a dating website, Bailey met Aubrey Trail, a man with a history of fraud, issuing fraudulent checks and theft. Aubrey had created a cult where he referred to himself as the Vampire Daddy and paid women $200 weekly to follow his unusual rules. At the time of Sydney's disappearance, Aubrey and Bailey faced a court order to pay over $40,000 in fraud reparations and had multiple misdemeanors against them. On November 19, 2017, they went into hiding. When police searched their apartment, they found that some walls had been scrubbed with bleach, which a neighbor confirmed. After a few days, the police located Aubrey and Bailey at a hotel in Branson, Missouri, and took them into custody a few weeks after Sydney's disappearance was reported. A thorough examination of phone records and Bailey's location data led the police to the gruesome discovery of Sydney's remains. Her body had been dismembered, with 13 parts found in black plastic bags in ditches in Clay County. Tragically, some of her organs, including her heart, were missing. Bailey and Aubrey were charged with first-degree murder, improperly disposing of human remains, and conspiracy to commit a felony. Bailey pleaded not guilty to all three charges. Aubrey, on the other hand, pleaded not guilty to felony murder and conspiracy, but guilty to improperly disposing of human remains. However, Aubrey's various statements were inconsistent, and he often appeared confused, changing his account of events and introducing new characters. He made bizarre claims, including that he was a vampire who could fly, and spoke about witchcraft. Aubrey claimed to be a cult leader and vampire, telling authorities he had witches in the cult who needed to kill another woman to gain powers. In one of his early court hearings, Aubrey admitted to killing Sydney Loof, but said it was an accident. He claimed to have paid Sydney $5,000 to participate in a threesome with two other women, which Sydney had agreed to. However, during the act, he strangled her with a cord by mistake. Aubrey also confessed to cutting Sydney's body into pieces, a ritual according to his beliefs, to release her soul to the gods in a sacred place. He believed this would help her reincarnate faster. However, the prosecution presented evidence contradicting Aubrey's story. Surveillance footage from November 14th showed Aubrey and Bailey checking into a Lincoln hotel near Sydney's home. The following day, they visited a home improvement store, buying a hacksaw, bleach, a folding saw, a stationary knife, and the bags used to store Sydney's remains. Furthermore, a surveillance camera caught Sydney encountering Aubrey at the Menards store on November 15th, unaware of the danger she was in. On June 11, 2018, the first court hearing took place regarding the murder and improper burial of Sydney Loof. Although separate trials were ordered for Bailey and Aubrey, the charges against them were essentially the same. The trials were held in Lexington because the defense attorneys successfully argued that a fair trial would be impossible in Wilbur due to the extensive publicity surrounding the case. The prosecution's case rested on the argument that Sydney's death was a premeditated murder, as evidenced by the fact that she was strangled and that the crime was carefully planned and executed. The jury listened to 3 other women who had previously dated Aubrey and Bailey, all of whom they met through Tinder. Each of these women had been intimate with Bailey and had also been involved with Aubrey. One of them shared that she had even gone on a trip with them after they met, during which Aubrey gave her $200 a week and invited her to join his group, which he called Witches, telling her that she would have to torture and kill someone to become a member. Another woman testified that Bailey had discussed breaking her fingers and dissecting a body in detail, revealing her fascination with torture. The prosecution pieced together the events of the fateful evening of November 15, 2017. Sydney had arranged to meet a woman she had known for a couple of days, with whom she had been chatting on Tinder. Bailey picked Sydney up from her apartment, and they drove around in his car. The car eventually stopped at Bailey's house, where Sydney was coaxed into the apartment. Once inside, Bailey and Aubrey attacked her, strangling her with an extension cord on the living room floor. Afterwards, Bailey and Aubrey meticulously cleaned the apartment, which the prosecution argued was a premeditated act. The next day, November 16th, they dismembered Sydney's body and dumped her remains in Clay County. The court heard testimony from Jennifer, the landlord, who stated on November 16th, she drove into the garage and immediately noticed a strong chlorine smell that intensified when she entered the house. The medical examiner testified that Sydney's death was ruled a homicide by asphyxiation. Toxicology reports showed that Sydney had antidepressants in her system at the time of death. In addition to the missing organs, the upper left arm, from just above the elbow to below the shoulder, was also found to be missing from Sydney's body. The prosecutors sought the death penalty for both defendants, and if the sentence was deemed unjust, the case would be retried. However, Aubrey denied any involvement in the occult and pleaded guilty only to improperly burying Sydney's remains. During his trial, Aubrey shouted that Bailey had no involvement in Sydney's death, claiming Bailey's innocence. In a dramatic turn, Aubrey then slashed his throat 3 times with a razor blade but survived and was detained until he made a full recovery. Aubrey testified he lied about Sydney Loof's death, admitting he met her in 2017 and paid her for illegal activities. He claimed Sydney died accidentally during an intimate act with an extension cord in November 2017. Aubrey confessed to dismembering and dumping her body, but maintained it was an accident, and he didn't seek help because he thought no one would believe him. Aubrey confessed to getting rid of Sydney's body, claiming it was an accident from an extension cord during intimate act. Bailey denied involvement, with her lawyers saying she was also a victim of Aubrey's manipulation. However, phone records and location data proved Bailey's involvement, tracking her near where Sydney's body parts were found. The court learned that Bailey initiated contact with Sydney and arranged a meeting. Bailey drove to Sydney's duplex on the evening of November 15th to pick her up. The prosecution claimed that Bailey took pleasure in discussing cruel acts and enjoyed talking about torture with Aubrey. Evidence presented in court revealed a planned crime on the day Sydney was killed. Bailey and Aubrey went to Home Depot around noon that day, where they bought tools, including a hacksaw, scissors, and a box cutter, as part of their plan. Bailey sent Sydney a text message inquiring about her day, and phone records and surveillance footage show that she sent the message from the Menards parking lot, where Aubrey was also present. Sydney, who worked at Menards, seemed unaware of Bailey's presence. A few hours later, Bailey sent Sydney another message on Tinder, stating that she was at Sydney's apartment and would pick her up soon. However, phone records indicate that instead of going on a date as Sydney believed, Bailey and Aubrey went to the apartment where they lived. Bailey's attorney, Todd Lancaster, argued that the evidence only showed that Bailey was guilty of aiding and abetting the improper disposal of Sydney's body by buying bleach in garbage bags. On November 8, 2021, Bailey Boswell received a life sentence. The Loof family had waited 3 long years, grieving and yearning for their Sydney, anticipating a verdict that would bring them solace. Prior to this, on July 11, 2019, a jury took less than 3 hours to convict Aubrey Trail of premeditated conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and improper burial of human remains. A 3-judge panel described his crime as cold and calculated. In the trial's second phase, determining whether he should face execution, county prosecutors secured the death penalty for Aubrey Trail, fulfilling their promise. Consequently, on June 9, 2021, Aubrey Trail was put to death by lethal injection. Aubrey Trail, the con artist accused of brutally murdering Nebraska woman Sydney Loof, allegedly deceived his cult followers by claiming to be a flying mind-reading vampire with a coven of 12 witches. He claimed these witches gained their powers by killing people. Fortunately, in this real-life story, justice prevailed, and through the trial, the monster faced the end of his trail. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Williams. Michelle was raised in Hurst, a suburb of Dallas, Texas, alongside her younger sister Laura. After their mother left to pursue a better life, their father took on the responsibility of raising them. However, he struggled to provide for the family, often relying on unstable construction work and seeking solace in alcohol. In an attempt to make ends meet, Michelle's father devised and carried out schemes to obtain easy money. He would take jobs at factories, intentionally injure himself, and collect insurance payouts. Although this tactic initially worked, it was eventually exposed with the help of CCTV cameras at one of his workplaces, resulting in his arrest and imprisonment. Growing up in an environment filled with deception and manipulation, Michelle became accustomed to a life of dishonesty. She desperately sought escape from this reality, but the lies and deceit had become ingrained in her way of life, making it difficult for her to imagine an alternative. Michelle longed to grow up quickly and leave her impoverished life behind. By the age of 15, she had developed into an attractive young woman, drawing attention from both her peers and older individuals. Michelle soon discovers that she can use her femininity and charm to influence the men around her and get what she wants. As a result, she enters a series of romantic relationships with various men. At 17, Michelle drops out of school and marries 16-year-old Kenneth O'Brien, telling him she's pregnant. Kenneth takes responsibility for his young wife and unborn child, joining the army to provide for them. They move frequently, having 2 more children, but Michelle grows dissatisfied with their nomadic lifestyle and temporary military housing. After 5 years, Michelle leaves Kenneth, citing his infidelity and physical abuse as reasons for the divorce. She returns to her hometown of Hurst, portraying herself as a victim of domestic violence to garner support from relatives and friends. As Michelle rebuilds her life, she reconnects with an old classmate, Brandon, and falls in love. Brandon is smitten with Michelle and happily accepts her 3 children from her previous marriage. They were preparing to get married, but just before the wedding, Brandon became furious with Michelle. He discovered that she had not finalized her divorce from her first husband. Michelle had been afraid to discuss the divorce with her ex-husband due to his abusive behavior, and as a result, she hadn't sent the necessary documents. With the help of a lawyer, they quickly resolved the issue, and they was able to get married in 1994. Initially, their family life was peaceful and routine. Brandon focused on growing his IT company, while Michelle worked as a dental assistant. However, Michelle had bigger aspirations. She began bringing home various dental equipment and supplies. Brandon's concerns grew as he suspected something was wrong. It was later revealed that Michelle had been stealing. Fortunately, they avoided going to trial. However, this incident marked the beginning of Brandon's trust issues with his wife. When neighbors reported that cars frequently visited their house while Brandon was at work, he installed a tape recorder in several rooms. Upon listening to the recordings, he discovered that various men were visiting their home throughout the day. Brandon conducted his own investigation and discovered that Michelle's first marriage ended in divorce due to her repeated infidelities, contradicting her claim that it was her husband's abuse. Upon learning this, Brandon reached his limit and requested a divorce. Enraged that Brandon was the one to initiate the split, Michelle sought revenge while he was away at work. Brandon had a valuable saltwater aquarium with thousands of dollars worth of fish. Michelle destroyed it by pouring Comet into the tank, killing all the fish. But that was not the end of her destructive behavior. Brandon's dog, Domino, was also a victim of Michelle's cruelty. She gave the dog sleeping pills, which led to its death. However, this was only the beginning of Brandon's nightmare. Michelle's actions continued to cause harm, and Brandon eventually learned the truth about her when his marriage was ruined. What Michelle did to Brandon was not an isolated incident. Her treatment of other men was even more shocking. It was later discovered that Michelle's first child was the child of her and John Paul Ray, a high school classmate of hers. Instead of telling John the truth, Michelle convinces Kenneth O'Brien that the child is his and he is forced to marry her. For 13 years, Kenneth believed the child was his child and even paid child support from age 5 to 18. After Michelle's divorce from Brandon, she moved in with John, the father of her first child. They lived together in a common-law marriage for 8 years. However, their relationship ended abruptly when John suspected Michelle of cheating on him. Michelle confirmed she was having an affair, which led to John moving out and leaving most of her belongings behind. She then met Greg Williams, a man with a history of marital failures, having been married twice before and having a daughter named Taylor from his previous marriage to Katie. After Greg and Katie's divorce in 2003, they shared custody of Taylor and maintained a good relationship, which made a formal child support agreement unnecessary. Greg was a successful and generous man who seemed like a perfect partner for Michelle. In 2007, Greg and Michelle had a daughter named Michaela, and they got married a year later. Their marriage seemed like the epitome of the American dream, with plenty of money, children, and love. Michelle appeared to have finally achieved the life she had always wanted. Greg came from a family with strong principles and had achieved success through his own hard work from a young age. He was a sports enthusiast and a black belt in martial arts. Both Greg and Michelle owned guns, which they kept in their home in Keller. Michelle kept a silver .40 caliber pistol in a safe, while Greg stored his black LAA .45 caliber gun, always loaded, in a case under his bedside table. Despite their differences, they was committed to making their marriage work. They regularly hosted birthday parties for their children from previous relationships at their home in Keller. Michelle's adult children frequently hosted barbecues and pool parties at their home, which was always filled with friends. Despite their idyllic suburban life and bright daughter, Michelle and her husband Greg didn't fit the traditional American couple mold. They had met through an online forum for those interested in bondage, domination, sadism, and masochism, and their raucous adult gatherings had drawn numerous complaints from their neighbors. On October 13, 2011, at 4:40 a.m., an emergency call was made by a frantic woman, claiming she and her husband had been attacked by an intruder. She reported being injured and her husband shot. Police quickly arrived at the scene, discovered a blaring television and a baby sleeping on the couch inside the house. Michelle's daughter was fast asleep and unharmed during the incident. However, Michelle's behavior raised suspicions among the police officers who arrived at the scene. Despite claiming to have just experienced a burglary and assault, Michelle appeared remarkably calm and composed. Her hair was styled, and she was fully dressed, which seemed inconsistent with her story. The police soon cordoned off the entire gated community and thoroughly searched the home. As the investigation progressed, Michelle was taken to the Keller Township Police Station for further questioning. Over several hours of interrogation, her account of the events began to unravel. Michelle initially claimed that an intruder, dressed in black, had struck her on the head with a wrench. She alleged that she fell to the ground but remained conscious and heard a gunshot. According to her, the intruder then fled through the back door. However, the evidence at the scene contradicted her story. Greg Williams, the victim, was found shot in the head while lying in bed. A .45 caliber handgun and a wrench were discovered near the back door, but the circumstances suggested that Michelle's account was not entirely credible. The investigation found no fingerprints on the weapons and no signs of forced entry. The family's valuables, including a large sum of cash, were left untouched. Security footage revealed that the only car to enter the gated community before the crime belonged to a newspaper delivery person. Michelle attempted to mislead the police by fabricating a story about the attack. She even went so far as to injure herself with a wrench and stage the scene. However, detectives noticed inconsistencies in her account. The discovery of the gun used in the crime, devoid of fingerprints, further raised suspicions. The final discrepancy was the untouched $20,000 in cash, which Michelle couldn't explain. While Michelle was unable to provide a reason for why her husband, a successful businessman and devoted father, would take his own life, she was able to justify her own actions. Michelle claimed she wanted to protect their young daughter from the painful truth about her father's death. She told the police that she had cleaned the gun and washed her husband Greg's hands to remove fingerprints, and then staged a fake home invasion before calling for help. This explanation seemed strange, but it explained why no evidence of an intruder was found. Michelle also admitted to using bleach to clean up the crime scene and hitting herself in the face with a wrench to make the attack look more believable. From the start, the police in Keller suspected that Michelle's story was not true, but at the time, they did not have any physical evidence that linked her to the crime. Michelle was arrested for lying to the police, but she was later released. Around 5 p.m. on the day of her husband's murder, Michelle visited her sister Laura's home. During the evening, Michelle cried occasionally, but her sister felt that Michelle's tears seemed insincere. Notably, Michelle didn't mention her late husband's name once. The next morning, when questioned by police, Michelle appeared to be in a great mood. She was well-dressed, had styled her hair, and was wearing makeup. Despite the ongoing investigation into her husband's death, Michelle went out for breakfast at a popular restaurant. As investigators struggled to find a motive and credible evidence, Michelle inadvertently provided them with both. During her initial interrogation, Michelle claimed she wasn't interested in money. However, her actions after Greg's death told a different story. She quickly began selling off assets from their family businesses and spending large sums of money. Michelle had been cashing checks through her husband Greg's IT company, but the exact amount is unknown. It is likely that the amount was substantial. After selling the Blueberries frozen yogurt store in Keller, Michelle made a crucial mistake. She attempted to claim the payout on Greg's life insurance policy, for which she was the sole beneficiary. The policy was taken out on August 12, 2011, nearly 2 months before Greg's death. However, Michelle overlooked a key detail: the policy did not cover Greg's death since he had taken his own life. As a result, the insurance company denied her the $60,000 payout, which was the primary motive for the crime. Later, another financial irregularity came to light that raised suspicions about Michelle. It was discovered that she had used falsified financial documents to secure a mortgage loan for the house that she and Greg were planning to buy before his death. The account numbers had been intentionally altered, and the lender did not immediately detect the elaborate scheme. Following Greg's death, Michelle canceled a meeting with the mortgage company, and the fake account went undiscussed until it caught the attention of the police. Despite the scrutiny, Michelle felt confident in her ability to avoid consequences and wrote a check for $188,000 to attorney Kenneth Wincorn. She then took a week-long vacation to Grapevine with her children. During a 3-month investigation into Greg Williams' death, police uncovered a web of deceit spun by his wife, Michelle. An autopsy revealed that Greg was shot from a distance of 12 to 18 inches. A toxicology report also showed that Greg had a large amount of sleeping pills in his system at the time of his death. Further investigation found no evidence of a break-in or assault on the house. Instead, police determined that Michelle had sedated her husband, turned up the TV volume, and shot him from close range. Their daughter was asleep in her room and did not hear the shooting. On November 3, 2011, the Tarrant County Medical Examiner officially ruled Greg's death a homicide. Michelle Williams was arrested on January 9 while on her way to a fitness center. She was charged with murder, tampering with evidence, and providing a false statement to police. As the sole witness and suspect, Michelle's bail was set at $522,000. However, she spent only a week in custody before being released on a reduced bail of $85,000. Michelle walked out of jail wearing gym clothes and a GPS monitor, accompanied by her new attorney, Kenneth Wincorn. However, this news infuriated Kathy, Greg's first wife, as she had paid Wincorn with money from Greg's estate, which she believed should not be used to defend Michelle, who was accused of killing Greg. According to online court records, Kenneth Wincorn's law firm had handled Greg and his ex-wife Kathy's divorce in 2003, and his name appeared on documents related to the custody agreement for their daughter Taylor in 2008. However, Wincorn later provided evidence showing his company, rather than him personally, had handled Greg's divorce case, which cleared him of the accusations that he had colluded with Michelle. Kenneth Wincorn learned of Greg's murder from an IT company employee. He described the news as shocking. Later, Michelle sought his help after her attempt to profit from Greg's death failed. Michelle changed her name to Shelley and presented herself as a fitness guru on Facebook. She publicly revealed her relationship with Gene Wallace, a friend of her oldest son who is nearly 15 years younger than her. Shelley and Gene opened a fitness club in Bedford and actively promoted it online. Michelle spent the next few months attending court hearings, enjoying her new relationship, and participating in fitness classes while wearing a GPS tracking ankle bracelet. Her courtroom attire often included miniskirts, knee-length boots, and revealing blouses. According to Greg's ex-wife Kathy, Michelle never showed any signs of mourning Greg's death. Rob Conover, a friend of Greg's for over 20 years, attended many of Michelle's hearings. He observed how Michelle skillfully manipulated police officers, portraying herself as an innocent woman in need of protection. On October 9, 2013, 45-year-old Michelle took a plea deal, pleading guilty to tampering with evidence and deadly conduct. Michelle Williams has been sentenced to 18 years in prison for tampering with evidence and engaging in deadly, dangerous conduct. This is a third-degree felony that is only recognized in a few states. Initially, Michelle admitted to cleaning the gun and her husband Greg's body, but the lack of her DNA at the scene raised doubts about the first-degree murder charge. The trial of Michelle Williams, also known as Keller's Black Widow, has begun. Prosecutors allege that she intentionally targeted her husband in 2011 to collect on his substantial life insurance policy. They described the crime as a clearly planned scheme motivated by greed. According to prosecutors, Michelle drugged her husband with sleeping pills and then shot him in the head to collect the insurance payout. Michelle admitted to cleaning the gun and Greg's body, but the lack of her DNA at the scene raised doubts about the first-degree murder charge. In a statement, Michelle's attorney, Kenneth Wincorn, highlighted the challenges in the case due to the thoroughly cleaned crime scene. If the jury finds that Michelle tampered with evidence and cleaned up the crime scene, she could receive a life sentence. During the trial, prosecutors stated that in the hours preceding the violent death, Greg Williams had a heated argument with his wife over financial issues. The altercation escalated to the point where he slapped her for spending a significant amount of money intended for a house down payment. In contrast, Michelle Williams' defense team claimed that Greg Williams took his own life. Defense attorney Clay Graham added that Greg Williams frequently struggled with depression and was known to use sedatives and steroids regularly. Michelle Williams' husband, Greg, was found dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Michelle stated that she attempted to cover up the incident to shield her 4-year-old daughter from the truth. Throughout the court hearings, Michelle maintained a composed appearance but showed some emotional response when presented with photographs of her deceased husband. Michelle planned to blame Greg's ex-wife for the crime, claiming it was due to custody disputes. However, this plan was flawed as there were no actual disputes. Michelle's adult son testified against her, revealing she had asked him to assist in framing Greg's ex-wife. After many hours of deliberation, the jury found Michelle guilty of tampering with physical evidence, a felony offense. She received a harsh sentence, 60 years in prison, with the stipulation that she must serve at least 30 years before becoming eligible for parole. Michelle has not expressed remorse for her actions and continues to evade full responsibility for her crimes. She is currently serving her time at Mountain View Prison in Gatesville, Texas. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Vicki Roberts. Vicki Roberts was born in September 1984 in northwest England, where she was raised in a traditional and devoutly religious family. She was the younger of 2 daughters and was raised with strong Christian values. She attended a Christian school, where she also developed her musical talents and sang in the choir. Those who knew Vicki described her as a kind, friendly, and helpful person who was always willing to lend a hand. After completing high school, Vicki enrolled in university and took a part-time job at an IKEA store to support herself. It was there that she met Michael Roberts, and their initial friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. Michael was only a year older than her. Like Vicki, Michael balanced his studies with a part-time job at IKEA and made time for sports. He was also careful about his appearance and made a good impression on those around him. Vicki was initially put off by Michael's bold and outgoing personality, but she soon found herself developing strong romantic feelings for him. Michael was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, to a family of modest means. His father was a successful chemical engineer who expected a lot from his 2 sons, particularly Michael, the eldest. As a result, Michael grew up with high ambitions and a strong sense of purpose. He was a diligent student and developed into a driven and accomplished individual. Michael was a social butterfly with many friends and was often the life of the party. However, he took the most pride on the love front. With his good looks, sense of humor, and charming personality, Michael was a catch. He was also intelligent and well-read, able to hold his own in conversations on a wide range of topics. Michael's parents had instilled in him the idea that he was exceptional, praising his intelligence, beauty, and potential for success. However, this upbringing may have also fostered narcissistic tendencies. Despite this, Michael felt a deep-seated need to live up to his parents' expectations and be the perfect son, driving him to strive for their approval. Michael had a series of brief relationships and frequently dated multiple people simultaneously. He was confident in his charm and enjoyed the thrill of pursuing women who seemed out of his reach. For Michael, this was a game, a challenge to be won. Vicky is one of the challenges he wants to conquer. She was a modest and unattainable woman who initially kept Michael at arm's length, refusing even casual invitations. Vicky was focused on her studies and spent her free time at church, leaving little room for dating or relationships. Michael, however, was determined to win her over. It took Michael a few months to win Vicky over, but eventually she agreed to go out with him. He had charmed her with his sweet gestures, flowers, gifts, and thoughtful surprises. He even invited her to meet his parents, who immediately took a liking to her and approved of their son's choice. Vicky was convinced that Michael was genuinely interested in her, so she gave in to his advances. He became her first serious partner, and she felt truly happy when she was with him. It seemed like fate had brought them together. Michael also appeared to be in love and ready to settle down, but their happiness was short-lived. From the outside, their relationship seemed perfect. They were both young, attractive, and full of energy and ambition, with big plans for the future. Vicky soon discovered that Michael had a strong and adventurous approach to sex, with a high sex drive and a desire to try new things in the bedroom. At first, Michael didn't pressure Vicky to engage in certain activities, fearing she would leave him. However, once he felt secure in their relationship, he revealed his true desires. Vicky, a modest and religious person, was shocked but deeply in love with Michael and trusted him, keeping their private life a secret. Things took a turn when Michael proposed to Vicky, and she happily accepted, believing that marriage would bring an end to his experimental behavior. However, her closest friend began to notice Vicky covering up bruises and marks under her clothes. When confronted by her friend, Vicky initially denied any wrongdoing by Michael but eventually confessed that the marks were a result of Michael's affinity for bondage, toys, and other devices during their intimate moments. Vicky confided in her friend that she and Michael had intimate relations up to 5 times a week. Michael considered himself a skilled lover, viewing intimacy as an art form and the means of self-expression. Although he would occasionally compromise when Vicky refused to participate in his more extreme and reckless experiments, he usually managed to persuade her to give in to his desires. After graduating, Vicky became pregnant unexpectedly and decided to change careers. She soon landed a job as an account manager at a logistics company. Michael also left his job at IKEA and became a sales consultant at a large electronics retailer, selling phones, laptops, and other gadgets. Thanks to his charisma and persuasive abilities, he consistently exceeded his sales targets and quickly became one of the top-performing employees. Michael's success led to a promotion to senior sales, and he was being considered for a transfer to the company's main office. However, he needed to undergo additional training to improve his qualifications first. Michael enjoyed the training sessions and business trips to London, and he took great pride in his accomplishments. As a result, he often forgot about Vicky, his young fiancée, and only remembered her when he wanted intimacy. Vicky and Michael's relationship was lacking in several ways. They rarely spoke about each other or spent time together outside of the bedroom, making Vicky feel invisible to him. Meanwhile, Michael was secretly having affairs with co-workers, clients, and casual acquaintances. During this time, Vicky discovered she was pregnant and shared the news with Michael, expecting him to be thrilled and expedite their wedding plans. Instead, he was furious and insisted that she terminate the pregnancy, citing their youth and the fact that they had their whole lives ahead of them. Vicky was shocked and refused to consider abortion. Michael then attempted to persuade Vicky by appealing to her concerns about her family. He claimed that her parents, who were deeply religious, would be angry and disappointed in her for becoming pregnant out of wedlock. However, Michael promised that if Vicky agreed to have an abortion, they could keep and plan to have children after they were married. Vicky was faced with a tough decision, but Michael's persistence eventually won her over, and she went to the hospital. Unfortunately, the experience was complicated, and Vicky had to stay in the hospital for a few days. It took her nearly 3 weeks to recover. During this time, her doctor strictly advised her against intimate relationships. When Michael found out, he became furious. It was then that Vicky realized Michael had mental health issues and an addiction to sex. Without intimacy, he became unbearable, frequently leaving the house, citing urgent work matters. Vicky suspects Michael is having an affair, and she hoped that getting married would help him change his ways and be more committed to their relationship. As it turned out, their relationship was loveless, and Michael was leading a double life. Their 2-year engagement was just a convenient arrangement for him, as he had a loyal partner waiting for him at home, taking care of the household, while he maintained a string of mistresses on the side, which he frequently replaced. Vicky always trusted Michael and forgave him whenever he cheated, as long as he promised it wouldn't happen again. However, as time passed, Vicky began to pressure Michael into getting married, as she wanted to start a family and have children. Her parents also brought up the topic frequently, but what really pushed Michael to consider marriage was the insistence of his own parents, whom he didn't want to disappoint. Michael's parents adored Vicky, thinking she was perfect for their son. They constantly asked and they would tie the knot and give them grandchildren. With the help of his parents, Michael and Vicky organized a grand wedding, complete with a white dress, limousine, and a beautiful ceremony. The newlyweds appeared to be in love and happy, with a long life ahead of them. After the wedding, they settled into a large, cozy house in a prestigious area of Warrington, close to Michael's parents. Despite their marriage, Michael didn't truly love Vicky. It was more of a way to appear normal to others. Vicky never expressed her concerns about Michael's unusual behavior and frequent infidelity, allowing him to freely change partners. Meanwhile, Michael's career was thriving. He received a promotion and a significant salary increase after being transferred to a new office. His direct supervisor was Carrie Hall, the head of administration at Phones for You. Carrie was a decade older than Michael, divorced, and raising her son independently. Despite her tough exterior, she was attractive, well put together, and strong-willed, as her position demanded. For a while, she ignored Michael's subtle advances, but to him, her indifference was a signal to take action. Michael set out to win over Carrie, using his natural charm and eloquence to capture her attention. After about a month, Carrie reciprocated his interest, and they began a regular affair, meeting in hotel rooms. Their relationship was intense and passionate, with a focus on experimentation and exploration. Carrie, a confident and mature woman, was flattered by the attention of the younger Michael. She was aware that Michael was unlikely to end his marriage for her. Michael, on the other hand, was eager to explore his desires with Carrie, which he felt he couldn't express with his wife. He would often lie to his wife about working late or attending corporate events, while confiding in Carrie about his unhappy marriage and his desire to divorce. However, he never made any concrete moves to end his marriage. The affair lasted for over a year, with Carrie seemingly content with the arrangement. She made no demands for Michael to leave his wife and was satisfied with their clandestine meetings and the excitement they brought. Carrie's behavior changed as she started dressing more conservatively, covering her body with long sleeves and high-necked clothing, a departure from her usual style that highlighted her athletic build. Carrie confided in her close friend about her lover Michael's extreme intimate experiments, which often crossed a line. She showed her friend the evidence, a bite mark on her chest and bruises on her neck from his intense grip. There were also marks on her wrists from the ropes he used to tie her up, giving him complete control. The friend was alarmed and urged Carrie to report the incidents to the police, but Carrie refused, explaining that the acts were consensual and Michael usually warned her about what he was going to do. However, the intensity of the experiences often got out of hand. For instance, Michael enjoyed choking his partner, claiming it would enhance the experience, but there were times when Carrie lost consciousness due to his excessive enthusiasm. Carrie's friend was fearful of Michael's strangulation games, but Carrie consistently gave in to his persuasion, believing that he would eventually stop or that she would become desensitized to the experience. Sadly, neither Carrie nor any of Michael's mistresses made any attempt to stop his cruel and painful experiments. Vicky had suspicions about her Michael's infidelity even before they got married. She believed that her love and care could change him and make him a devoted family man. However, after the wedding, his cheating continued and even worsened. When Michael denied his infidelity, Vicky decided to investigate on her own. One night, while Michael was asleep, Vicky checked his phone and found numerous intimate conversations with other women, including Carrie. She was shocked to discover that Michael had exchanged explicit photos with some of these women. The discovery was devastating for Vicky, and she packed her bags and temporarily moved in with a friend. Vicky kept her situation a secret from her family, fearing their reaction. She was afraid that her religious relatives would pressure her to get a divorce if they found out about Michael's adultery. Despite her heartbreak, Vicky still loved Michael and didn't want to give up on their marriage. Before leaving, she wrote him a heartfelt letter, confessing her love and telling him that he was the most important person in her life. Michael's wife had finally had enough of his promiscuous and decided to leave him. Before she went, she wrote him a handwritten note explaining that she knew about his cheating and couldn't take it anymore. She left the note on the refrigerator and gave him time to think about his actions, but made it clear that she wouldn't file for divorce just yet. Despite his wife's departure, Michael didn't seem to be particularly upset or remorseful. However, he did realize that he would miss having a quiet and submissive partner who took care of the household and tolerated his behavior. He decided to try to win her back and followed her to her friend's house, bringing a large bouquet of flowers. He apologized and begged her to return, promising to be faithful from then on. His wife, Vicky, wanted to believe him and decided to give him another chance. For a while, Michael made an effort to be more considerate and even came home for dinner. He deleted his correspondence with his mistress, Carrie, and changed his social media password to avoid suspicion. However, Michael's good behavior didn't last long. He soon started pursuing a new female employee, Karen Wilson, who was engaged to be married. Despite her initial reluctance, Michael persisted in his pursuit of her, and they began an affair. Meanwhile, he continued to see Carrie on the side, juggling multiple relationships at once. He became infatuated with a new woman and ended his relationship with 33-year-old Carrie Hall after 2 months, as he had grown tired of her. He told Karen a fabricated story about being unhappy in his marriage and claimed he was willing to leave his wife for her. Karen believed him, and they had an intimate encounter in the office. A week later, she ended her engagement, expecting Michael to follow through on his promise. Michael had no intention of divorcing his wife, Vicky, but he wanted to keep his new mistress. To keep her happy, he lied to her, telling her that he had already filed for divorce and was living with his parents. However, Vicky soon became suspicious that Michael was still cheating on her. She decided to take action and gathered evidence of his adultery. While Michael was in the shower, Vicky took his phone but found nothing incriminating because he had deleted all his text messages and changed his social media password. Undeterred, she waited until he fell asleep and then took his work laptop, where she found his social media account still logged in. There, she discovered messages between Michael and his new girlfriend, in which he professed his love and claimed to be divorcing Vicky and living with his parents. Vicky was shocked and took screenshots of the messages as proof of Michael's infidelity. She also found receipts for hotel rooms in his wallet. The next morning, she confronted Michael, presenting him with the evidence adultery. For the first time in their relationship, she lost her temper. Michael was taken aback and tried to apologize, promising it would never happen again. However, Vicky threatened to tell his parents about his infidelity, hoping they could talk some sense into him since she couldn't. Michael was enraged by his wife Vicky's threat to tell his parents about their problems. In a fit of anger, he slapped her. Vicky then got up and said she would go to his parents immediately, heading for the door. Michael caught up to her, grabbed a heavy jewelry box from the dresser, and hit her in the head twice, knocking her unconscious. He then strangled her with his bare hands until she stopped breathing. Feeling no remorse, Michael wrapped Vicky's body in a blanket, placed it in large garbage bags, and carried it to the garage. He quickly cleaned the house, packed up most of Vicky's belongings, and removed them. He then invited his lover, Karen, over, and they had dinner, had fun, and made love in the same bedroom where the murder had taken place. The next day, Michael ran off with Karen. He told his parents that Vicky had left him for another man, even showing them fake messages from Vicky's phone, which he had sent himself. He went to his parents' home, sobbing on his mother's shoulder, pretending to be distraught over his wife's supposed infidelity. Michael sent his parents-in-law messages saying that their daughter had left him for another man. He also told them to give her space and not to bother her. The messages claimed that Vicky had fallen out of love with Michael and had moved in with someone else. Her parents were shocked and tried to contact Vicky to hear her side of the story, but she refused to answer their calls, only responding with messages asking for time. Vicky's parents found Michael's story suspicious and went to his house to confront him. However, his explanation only raised more questions. They soon discovered that Vicky had not shown up for work, which further alarmed them. They decided to report their concerns to the police, leading to an investigation. On December 1, 2009, Michael bought a shovel, rope, rags, and cleaning supplies from a hardware store. However, the police arrived at his house on the same day. He had been caught before he could dispose of a body. The police initially found nothing out of the ordinary, but Michael's actions and alibi sparked suspicion and raised several questions. Notably, they overlooked a large package in the garage during their search. Inside the house, they found no signs of her presence, such as clothes, documents, or personal items, which could suggest she had left of her own accord. However, Vicky's laptop was discovered in the bedroom, and upon seizing it, the police found screenshots of Michael's incriminating conversations with his mistresses, which Vicky had saved. The investigation took a significant turn when authorities made a geolocation request to Vicky's cell phone, which had been regularly sending messages to her husband and relatives. To everyone's surprise, the phone was found to be located in the marital home of Vicky and Michael. This led to a second, more thorough search of the Roberts residence. During this search, a suspicious package was discovered in the garage, and its contents shocked all who were present. However, in a stunning twist, Michael, who had been cooperating with the police, suddenly vanished into thin air. He had taken a wallet containing cash, which allowed him to evade capture for several days. After his money ran out, Michael turned to one of his mistresses, Lavinia T., and asked if he could stay with her for a while. However, when Lavinia heard on the news that Michael was wanted for his wife's murder, she immediately contacted the police and reported his whereabouts. Eventually, he was arrested, put on trial, and convicted. When the authorities arrived to arrest Michael, he claiming he was innocent of the crime. A man claimed that his wife died accidentally during a consensual sex game where she asked him to strangle her with a rope belt, but he lost control. However, forensic experts disputed this claim, finding that she was actually strangled with bare hands, attacked from behind, and had 2 severe head injuries that occurred before her death, which were unrelated to the alleged sex game. The trial began in January 2010, with the defendant, Michael Roberts, maintaining that his wife's death was an accident and hoping for a lenient sentence. However, the autopsy results revealed a different story. Roberts had intentionally hit his wife on the head twice, then strangled her and hidden her body in the garage. As a result, Roberts was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Brianna Marie Schneller. Brianna Marie Schneller was an 18-year-old with a vibrant personality who loved Mexican food, music, dancing, and roller coasters. She was an exceptional student, and ranking as the top student at Everest High School in Washington, according to her parents, Craig and Lori Schneller. Brianna had a promising future ahead, with a trip to Tennessee planned for the summer and a notable achievement as the only student in Wisconsin to qualify for a national competition in professional and technical fields. Brianna's passion was to pursue a career in restaurant management and eventually start her own business in the food service industry. To gain experience and skills, she worked part-time at El Mezcal restaurant in Rib Mountain. Those who knew her, including friends, colleagues, and customers, described her as kind and responsive. Brianna's life was on the verge of two major events: her graduation and her wedding to her 22-year-old fiancé, Sebastian Ramirez. Brianna's parents initially disapproved of her relationship with Sebastian due to their age difference and concerns that she was growing up too quickly. However, after getting to know Sebastian better, they began to trust him and saw that he genuinely loved Brianna and had serious plans for their future together. They eventually moved in together, sharing an apartment on 12th Avenue in Wow with Sebastian's 19-year-old younger brother, Hugo. To outsiders, it seemed like the three of them got along well and lived harmoniously, burning the envy of many for their close friendship. Sebastian and Hugo supported Brianna's interests and also worked with her at a local restaurant called El Tequila Salsa. It's likely that this is where Sebastian and Brianna first met. Despite their seemingly perfect life, tragedy struck on May 2, 2009. The day began like any other, with Sebastian waking up early and trying not to disturb Brianna, who was still sleeping peacefully beside him. It was a day off from school, and she had no reason to wake up early. Brianna woke up while her boyfriend was in the shower. They exchanged affectionate greetings and discussed their plans for the day. Meanwhile, Sebastian tried to rouse Hugo, who had returned home early that morning after a late-night party. Hugo was clearly hungover. After Sebastian left for work, which was just a short walk away, his younger brother followed suit. Brianna was left alone in the apartment. Later, Hugo was feeling unwell. His hangover was severe, and he was struggling to concentrate. He decided to take an early lunch break and headed home to rest. When he arrived at the apartment, everything seemed normal at first. However, as he entered his brother's room, he noticed that it was in disarray. Brianna was lying on the floor, unresponsive. Hugo rushed to her side and asked what was wrong, but she didn't answer. At first, he didn't notice the blood. Hugo discovered a horrific scene when he removed a towel covering a woman's face. Her severe injuries had left Hugo almost unrecognizable, and he was utterly shocked and overcome with grief at the sight of her. Despite his distress, he knew he had to act quickly and ran to his neighbor's apartment on the floor below for help. The neighbor, a woman, called emergency services at 1:30 p.m., who was too distraught to speak clearly. The emergency operator received the call and was told that she was the girlfriend of Sebastian. She was lying on the floor, severely injured with cuts all over her body and a badly disfigured face. The operator was informed that she showed no signs of life. Police and paramedics rushed to the apartment building after receiving a call. When they arrived, they found a crowded parking lot, but one person stood out, Hugo Ramirez. He approached the officers and led them to the apartment where the incident occurred. Inside, they found a disturbing scene. Brianna's body was severely injured, with deep stab wounds on her chest, neck, and wrist. Hugo was visibly shaken and could barely speak as he led officers to the apartment. He simply pointed to Brianna's body, and the officers took note of the scene. The officers asked Hugo to leave the room so that forensic specialists could begin their examination. The specialists observed that the blood on the floor had already started to dry, suggesting that Brianna's body had been there for some time. It was clear that she had tried to defend herself, as evidenced by the defensive cuts on her arms. However, the attacker had overpowered her, leaving behind a crime scene with a significant amount of evidence. The forensic team found several key pieces of evidence, including a bloody iron on the floor, which appeared to have been used to strike Brianna's face. The iron was broken, with pieces scattered nearby. 2 knives were found in the bathroom sink, one of which was missing its sharp tip. Blood was also found on the soap, suggesting that the attacker had washed their hands after the crime. However, the most notable piece of evidence was a bloodied shoe print on the carpet, which drew the investigators' attention. The investigation of the house uncovered many new details. Notably, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the victim may have known her attacker or that the perpetrator had a way to enter the apartment without breaking in. Additionally, a large sum of money was found scattered throughout the apartment, consisting of bills ranging from $1 to $20. According to Hugo, this money was comprised of tips they had accumulated at work, which were carelessly left lying around. At first glance, it appeared that nothing was missing from the apartment, indicating that the attack was not motivated by robbery. This theory was further supported by the discovery of a broken knife tip in the victim's body. The fact that the knife broke during the attack indicates that the perpetrator applied considerable force. It's crucial to grasp what may have motivated someone to hold such intense feelings of anger and aggression against she. Uncovering the cause of this brutal and unprecedented attack is crucial in shedding light on the matter. Craig and Laura Schneller anxiously waited at the police station, having heard that something terrible had happened at their daughter's home. Unfortunately, they had been unable to contact Brianna, and their hearts were heavy with worry. The officers had to tell the parents Brianna that their worst fears had come true. The news was devastating. Their daughter, Brianna, had passed away. The loss of a child is one of the greatest sorrows a parent can experience, and for the Schnellers, it was a life-altering moment. To confirm the identity, the authorities showed them photographs of Brianna, but only those that clearly showed her face, as some of the other images were too graphic. After confirming the tragic news, the Schnellers were in shock. With the help of a psychologist, they were able to compose themselves and answer questions from the police. They were eager to assist in the investigation and help catch the person responsible. The Schnellers provided as much information as they could about their daughter's life, but they insisted that she had no known enemies. They also revealed that Brianna's mother had been the last person she had spoken to that morning. Her mother, Craig, took Brianna's car to the repair shop and messaged her daughter around 10 a.m. to let her know. Brianna replied to the message. The investigation shows that the tragedy occurred at a point in time that was after they sent messages to each other and before Hugo's arrival. As part of their inquiry, detectives first interviewed the Ramirez brothers, Sebastian and Hugo, questioning them separately. Sebastian, Brianna's fiancé, stated that he woke up at 9:15 a.m., had a brief conversation with Brianna while getting ready for work, and then woke up his brother, Hugo. Around 10:15 a.m. Sebastian claimed he was already at the restaurant when he received a phone call informing him about the incident. Hugo's account corroborated Sebastian's, saying he left the house around 10:15 a.m., shortly after his brother. He returned home at 1:20 p.m. due to feeling unwell and wanting to rest. When Hugo found Brianna's body, his reported illness and fatigue vanished almost instantly. The events that followed were a daze. He was so shocked that he couldn't think clearly about how to respond. His mind went blank, and his hands shook uncontrollably, prompting him to seek help from a neighbor. The Ramirez brothers' accounts were believable, and their distress seemed authentic. Nevertheless, The police had seen convincing performances before, so they needed concrete evidence to confirm their innocence. It was possible that one of the brothers was involved in the crime and the other was covering for him. To investigate this, detectives asked about their relationships with each other. Sebastian expressed his love for Brianna and his excitement for their upcoming wedding. Hugo was questioned about whether he had any issues with Brianna or if they had argued, but he denied it. Hugo also explained that while he found her attractive and charming, he had no romantic intentions towards her because he valued his good relationship with his brother and would never jeopardize his happiness. Brianna was like a sister to Hugo. And after hours of questioning, neither Hugo nor Sebastian raised any suspicions. The police took DNA samples from the brothers and allowed them to return home. To verify the brothers' alibis, detectives spoke with employees of El Tequila Salsa restaurant and reviewed the restaurant's security footage. The brothers' accounts checked out, and the possibility of a domestic-related crime was ruled out. The investigation continued, and the question remained, who could have committed such a heinous crime against an innocent young woman? Was there a predator lurking in the city who had been watching Brianna and waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The police considered this possibility as they analyzed the evidence. The autopsy results confirmed the police's initial suspicions. The sequence of events was reconstructed as follows. Brianna was first hit on the head with a blunt object, likely an iron, which caused a severe injury. The perpetrator then cut her throat and inflicted multiple stab wounds to her body. The attack was extremely violent, with so many wounds that even experts couldn't count them all. At least 2 of the injuries were fatal. DNA from an unknown source was found under Brianna's fingernails, indicating that she struggled and resisted her attacker. Initial reports that nothing was missing from Brianna's home were later found to be incorrect. Brianna's phone had actually been taken, and Sebastian was the one who discovered its loss and informed the detectives. This new information became a crucial lead in the investigation. The police learned from the phone provider that the phone was still active and obtained its location. Surprisingly, the phone was found to be nearby, specifically on the premises of the restaurant where Sebastian and Hugo worked. This revelation added complexity to the case, given the brothers' solid alibi and the suspicious circumstances surrounding the missing phone. The detectives rushed to the location and found that the phone's coordinates led them to the parking lot of a shopping center that housed the restaurant. A search of the area revealed that the phone was likely in one of the trash bins. After a brief search, a plastic takeout bag with the logo of El Tequila Salsa was found in a container. Inside the bag were the victim's phone, 2 mismatched gloves, and a pair of women's underwear. One of the gloves had a bloodstain. The bag and its contents were sent to the lab for further analysis, which could potentially yield fingerprints or DNA from the perpetrator. After seeing a photo of the bag's contents, Sebastian identified his girlfriend's underwear. The police then questioned the restaurant staff multiple times. On May 5th, they asked everyone to provide a DNA sample and checked for any scratches or injuries. They also carefully reviewed all the surveillance footage, both inside and outside the building and nearby businesses. The police had a challenging task to figure out who had thrown away the bag. A kitchen worker initially caught the investigators' attention because he arrived late to work after Brianna had already been found lifeless. However, he had a solid alibi. He had been pulled over for speeding on his way to the restaurant. Reviewing the security footage was crucial to the investigation, which led them to another suspect, Raul Ponce Rocha, the 24-year-old kitchen manager. On the day of the crime, Raul left the building at 10:18 a.m. wearing a brown hoodie and returned 35 minutes later, at 10:53 a.m., without it. When questioned, Raul explained that he had gone to pick up his friend Luciano, a dishwasher at the restaurant, who lived in the same building as Brianna and her colleagues. Raul claimed the trip took about 20 minutes, but there was a 15-minute gap in his timeline that he refused to explain. Luciano corroborated Raul's story, stating they drove straight to work without stopping. Nevertheless, the detectives remained skeptical about the unaccounted 15 minutes and Raul's suspicious behavior. Raul Ponce Rocha, the manager of El Tequila Salsa, had raised suspicions due to the cuts on his hands, which he claimed were from working with knives. However, there was not enough evidence to detain him at that point. Further investigation revealed that on May 2nd at 1:16 p.m., a single employee had exited the back door of the restaurant, and at the same time, only one person had approached the trash bins. This led to the quick identification of the suspect, who was surprisingly Raul Ponce Rocha, not Sebastian or Hugo Ramirez as initially suspected. A search warrant was obtained for Raul's home, and the search uncovered some peculiar items. Under his mattress, investigators found 4 pairs of women's underwear, several adult videos, a brown hoodie, and a glove similar to the one found in the trash bin. On the same day, Raul's DNA samples were sent for comparison with those found on the plastic bag, and a strand of female hair found on his clothing was also analyzed. All the evidence pointed to Brianna. It was only a matter of time before the test results confirmed the match. Raul was eventually arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. Sebastian was stunned when he learned that a suspect had been identified in the brutal crime. He had trouble believing that his co-worker, Raul Ponce Rocha, could be capable of such a heinous act. What motivated Raul to commit this crime, especially since he barely knew Brianna? Sebastian's impression of Raul was that he was a friendly and harmless person. The mystery began to unravel in 2011 when Raul stood trial. Despite a lengthy investigation, Raul consistently denied any involvement in the crime and never admitted guilt. However, the prosecution presented strong evidence that contradicted his claims. Raul's DNA was found on several key pieces of evidence, including the iron, knives, a plastic bag, and its contents, as well as under Brianna's fingernails. A shoe print at the crime scene also matched Raul's shoes. The evidence pieced together the events of May 2, 2009. On his way to work that day, Raul passed by Brianna's house, a place that had long fascinated him. Assuming she was out, since her car was not in the driveway, he took advantage of the opportunity to break into her apartment and take what he wanted. Raul had a disturbing habit of collecting women's underwear, with evidence found hidden under his mattress. On the day of the incident, Raul left work, supposedly to pick up his friend Luciano, but instead entered Brianna's apartment without warning. He easily gained entry, suggesting he may have had a key, and went directly to Brianna's room, where he began rummaging through her belongings. When Brianna confronted him, Raul was likely caught off guard and feared being recognized. Panicked, he grabbed the nearest object, an iron, and used it to strike her. He then escalated the violence by slashing her throat with a knife and inflicting multiple other injuries. The investigation found that the killer appeared to take pleasure in the brutal act, as evidenced by the numerous and excessive wounds inflicted on the victim. The attacker also used multiple knives during the assault. After committing the crime, Raul attempted to cover his tracks by washing his hands and removing his jacket, which was likely stained with blood. He then calmly returned to work, pretending nothing had happened, and drove Luciano to the restaurant as planned. Raul took advantage of the lunch break to dispose of the evidence bag in a trash bin, which was captured on the kitchen's video recordings. Before the trial, Raul admitted to meeting with Brianna but claimed he didn't kill her. However, he suspected someone else might have and named a former restaurant employee. Raul stated that he saw this acquaintance, Sergio, at Brianna's house on the day she died. This confirmed that Raul had indeed entered the Ramirez apartment. However, when Raul left, Sergio stayed behind and had an argument with Brianna. Raul's statement raised more questions and led to further investigations. The authorities verified the information and managed to contact Sergio, who was abroad at the time. Sergio appeared at the trial and testified that he was not involved in Brianna's death. He proved that he was not in the country on the day of the crime, as he had left weeks earlier to care for his ill father in Mexico. It became clear that Raul had hoped to falsely accuse Sergio and create doubt among the jurors. However, his plan failed, and Raul's actions showed that he had no qualms about accusing an innocent person of a heinous crime, and he felt no remorse for his actions. The trial of Raul Ponce Rocha drew a large crowd, including Brianna's family members and her friends Sebastian and Hugo. The young men struggled to keep their emotions in check, prompting officers to intervene multiple times to restore calm. In the end, Raul was found guilty of murdering Brianna Schneller and burglary, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving his sentence at a correctional facility in Wisconsin. After the verdict, Brianna's father expressed his gratitude that justice had been served. He shared that he still keeps a Father's Day card Brianna gave him and cherishes every memory of her.